in 40 seconds. Okay, good evening. Namaskar, Adab. Warm welcome to what is India's truly the only multimedia, multi-platform digital broadcast. From viewpoint in Khan Market, from viewpoint in the studios to, well, now talk to Bhupen across different digital platforms. This is how life post-corona is, well, changing for all of us. And this is how I think that life will be, I think, for a very long time. What we're going to do today on a day when the Prime Minister himself has spoken to all state chief ministers, and the biggest buzzword today is, well, are we here for the long run? Are we here to be in a lockdown scenario over a prolonged period of time? What's going to happen? There was a feeling that there was a Man Ki Baat, Prime Minister's address to the nation that was to happen today. That's not happening. I can confirm that to you. That's not what's going to happen today. Maybe the Prime Minister may think in terms of addressing the nation tomorrow, but even that is not being confirmed as we speak. Meanwhile, word which is coming out is that the Prime Minister has conveyed to all top cabinet ministers and to all secretaries that they should start resuming the responsibilities, albeit in a restricted manner. Now, are we in for a certain graded form of lockdown over the next 15 days? Can the Indian economy really afford to be in this lockdown scenario for a prolonged period of time? All that and much, much more coming up on this broadcast, which is being shared across Twitter and Facebook. You all know the ground rules. All your questions, all the queries, I take it to all our guests. And what a great pleasure to have two of the finest economic voices on the program today. Shamika, Ravi, a well-known economist, is on the show with us. Good evening. Thanks so much for taking time out, Shamika. And my former colleague, our very dear friend, author, journalist, Jagannathan, he's there too. And Jaggi has been writing extensively on what he believes needs to be done as far as this lockdown story is concerned. We'll be joined by various voices, a lot of citizens who've gotten to know that we're doing this broadcast, want to be a part of this broadcast. So my appeal to all of you who want to be a part of this video broadcast is this: well, please share your questions with us. And what we'll do as we go along, we will be able to take your questions. We'll be able to take your questions to all our panelists. So let me introduce our producer Joel as well. And again, live post Corona, here I am in Bhimtal, and my producer Joel is there in Ghaziabad, and we can put this show together using technology. So great to have all of you. Want to first begin with you, Shamika. You've been tweeting, you've been commenting, and there is all kinds of data which is coming in, and we will play a lot of the data which has come out in public domain. May I quickly just ask my producer, Joel Samuel, to put up the first slide? And I want to talk about this. This is a McKinsey report. And across India, I'm seeing everyone is talking about this McKinsey report, which is talking about three specific scenarios. What happens when those three scenarios, in the event of a lockdown, in the event of a graded lockdown, in the event of, well, a prolonged lockdown, what kind of an impact does it have on India's economy? Joel, why don't you pull up that slide of the McKinsey report, and we'll get Shamika to speak about that report. Essentially, Shamika, what this report is doing is that it is making us look at Indian economy and the scenario in hard data points, in hard numbers. So tell me, what do you make out of it? If I look at these three scenarios, and if I look at the impact, firstly, do you believe that there is no other way out? There is no other way out to deal with this epidemic other than, well, go in for an extended lockdown?
Well, you see, these decisions, Bhupen, have to be informed decisions, which means that the rationale for this cannot merely be the opportunity cost economically, right? And as much as us, the economists, we are extremely worried about what the prolonged, even the existing 21 days that we have already seen. It will not be like switching on the economy back. We are likely to see people not coming back to jobs. These social distancing norms are going to be maintained. The costs will be high, even in terms of business as usual, because that is just the new normal. But the decision to be informed also needs the medical and the health side of that story to emerge a little more clearly. And I think this is where we are still, a little bit blindfolded in terms of the way we have been testing and discovering the nature of the outbreak. We have identified the hotspots. Our current testing protocols have meant that we are very much chasing the fire. Because when we identify certain people who have met the criteria for the protocol, whether with the travel history or the contact tracing, or let's say acute respiratory disorder, they are showing the symptoms like pneumonia, etc., then they are getting tested, right? But it still means our focus in terms of testing and treatment is very much concentrated in about 60 odd districts of the country.
Right.
And the hotspots are very troubling. If you just look at the way the numbers are increasing every day, we are still very much in a growth phase. But what about the rest of the country? It's a very large country. 1.38 billion people locked up at home is a very large, it's an entire continent, and therefore the economic activity and the discomfort that it brings to life and livelihood is enormous, right? And I have said this also in the past that, look, COVID is uncertain and we are very afraid, and therefore afraid to lose lives to COVID. But there is something called all-cause mortality, right? People are not getting dialysis right now. Cancer patients are not able to go for regular treatment, etc. So life as is, even in the healthcare sector, forget about the rest of the economy, the SMEs and aviation, etc., that we are extremely concerned about as well. But even the health sector, overall mortality is disrupted, is perhaps rising because of the current lockdown. Now, we have to begin to aggressively test in the rest of the country to then say that these 200 districts are untouched. Therefore, let's open these out and go back to business as normal, because the costs are very significant. Now, I'm not talking about nationwide, very large samples. I'm very much talking about, new methods of either pooling samples, new methods, the whole rapid antibody testing that was declared, was allowed as of 2 days back. There are many new methods coming in where even with smaller samples, we are in a position to say that specific districts are not affected by the virus. Now, in that sense, there is no reason for them to remain in lockdown, but it has to be an informed decision. Right now, that information is, I think, missing. And therefore, we are very much worried, and we are still looking at the hotspot areas. And our decisions are getting driven by this growth in the total numbers that we are seeing of the COVID patients. Yeah.
Yes, Jaggi, where do you stand? The second part of this McKinsey report, which has been published, I look at one specific sector, and here I am in Uttarakhand right now. And since I moved on from TV just last week, and this is, I think, one of the biggest impact points of Corona epidemic, that I do believe that people will start looking at life, how life is going to change post-Corona. Now, I want to specifically look at one sector, Jaggi, with you, which is the agriculture sector. Just look at the numbers. 205 million people employed in this sector. In the event of a complete lockdown, look at the bank credit exposure. Look at the share of GDP as far as this sector is concerned. Can we really afford this lockdown? What the Prime Minister talks about today? Jaan bhi hai, jahan bhi hai. Very nice slogan. But how are both these, this Jaan bhi or Jahan bhi, how are these two really going to move hand in hand, Jaggi, according to you?
Well, let's be very clear. I think even in today's meeting, I think the PM said we have to see that the farmers don't suffer. We got to do something about agriculture. In fact, the first sector that needs to be almost completely freed, except for some very limited areas where the epidemic is very strong, has to be these things. Don't forget, we are at the Rabi harvest season, where we have to do three things. One is buy the grain, store it, and move it to the places where it's going to be consumed. So if you're going to lock down agriculture, you're going to have a humanitarian disaster that's far, far worse than COVID. Okay. Let's not forget one thing, that COVID has taken about 250 lives so far, right? On an average day, 25 to 30,000 Indians die every day. Let's assume that 80% of them die through not normal causes. So a lot of others also die. So we have to see the deaths in proportion to the normal sort of things. So if we got to start getting life back to normal, agriculture is the right place to begin. And the second thing which Shamika said, I completely agree, that you need to increase the pace of testing. But there are 400 districts that currently do not have a single case of coronavirus. There is absolutely no reason to lock them down. Only thing is, I don't feel that you can only look at it sector by sector, because if you say agriculture is there, then logically cargo and logistics has to move along with it. Secondly, when you talk of agriculture, we are not talking about rough grain. You need to have packaging, you need to have food processing, all those things have to come. So which is actually agro industry. So, and related industries need to come into the picture. If you keep all the agro industry locked up, saying that, only essential will move, what is essential is something cannot be restricted to say only rice and wheat is essential and vegetables maybe. Everything else is not essential, because so many other things go into the supply chain from farm to fork. So I think, and we need to get all these acts. So we need to start moving in the direction. So first, start those 400 districts where I think you don't have a problem. Test their random to check that nothing is coming back. Get them to normal, and the other places do super lockdowns in high hotspot areas. And then as testing expands, you will know what to expand. But agriculture needs to be freed quickly, and related industry next. And after that, many other things like logistics and many things need to move.
Okay, Mohan Guruswamy is live as well. Let me take the point which is made by Jaggi. If I take this point which is being made by Jaggi, that we need to free up agriculture quickly. What if you free up agriculture quickly, Mohan? And what if a week down the line you find out that in these areas where you have freed up, let's say, economic activity, what if there is a sudden spurt in the number of cases? What if the social distancing which is being spoken about ends up failing in the light of this? Is that a danger which you think Indian economy, Indian polity can afford to take at this stage?
Where is the social distancing? In northeastern Delhi, the population density is 60,000 people per square mile. And that is about the kind of density you have in most of our villages, where people live 8, 9, 10 to a room. In Delhi, in northeast Delhi, there are 27 people, families sharing one toilet. So what is the social distancing we're talking about? Social distancing works in South Delhi and all those other places where people have space and people are living in big apartments. In most Indian villages, 40% of Delhi lives in tight colonies. So there's no social distancing there. Now, your biggest problem is you have rendered 130, 140 million people jobless in one shot. They're daily wages, there are no wages, and there are no money in their pockets. People are going to be hungry, and you can run soup kitchens and canteens for a while. But how long will this continue? People need money.
This is an interactive broadcast. This is an interactive broadcast, Mohan. Through the program, what I do is that I just take some citizens' questions as well. And since Shamika and all of you are here, Shalini Jindal is there with us. Shalini is an entrepreneur. Hi. She's based in Gurugram. Hi, Shalini. I hope you're safe and sound. Shalini, since you run a business as well, you tell me, do you think Jaggi here is pointing out that we need to free up agriculture spaces quickly. We need to free up that sector quickly. As a citizen and as a resident of Gurugram, are you getting the sense that we are anywhere near maybe reversal of this lockdown?
Gurugram that way I think is contains people who are very aware, and they have been proactive, and we've very quickly done all the quarantine and all the containment that was necessary. So Gurugram looks very good. But that may not be a good reflection of how India is doing, pan-India, how the situation is. But so Gurugram is in good shape.
Shamika, Shamika, it may be restricted to Gurugram. Yeah, sorry, Mohan, you wanted to come in. Do go ahead, Mohan. And then I'll get Shamika.
And how India lives. Gurugram is certainly not the norm for India.
It's not
India. Most of India lives tightly packed colonies and villages. So social distancing is 80% of people, out of 80% of people who get infected by corona, 40% don't even have symptoms, and 80% recover. It's only 8 to 10% who need medical attention, and that too, you have high case mortality rates in countries like Italy and even New York City, because the population demography is different. The above 70, above 60 cohort is huge. In Italy, above 60 cohort, above 65 cohort is 23%. It's not the same in India. In India, the life expectancy is 68. So, so the number of old people who are vulnerable also, and the case mortality on this is 1.66. Diphtheria, 70%. There are other diseases which have case mortality. Common flu has case mortality about 1% a year. So why
But Mohan, here's my argument. On one hand, what you're saying is absolutely right. The common flu. India has all kinds of problems. I take that point. I'm not denying that point for a moment. But I'm going to go back to Shamika, and I specifically want to look at one instance. There is a group called Video Volunteers, and Video Volunteers has been trying to chronicle what is the real story in parts of India that mainstream media often tends to forget. And my attempt through these broadcasts is exactly to focus on these areas. So the question which I'm trying to find an answer to through all our esteemed panelists today, Azira Trivedi also joins us. She's a well-known yoga expert, and she's been trying to use technology to do her own business. She can do that, well, maybe because she's in the heart of the national capital. But, Shamika, I want you to look at this video closely and then tell me what does one make out of it. This is these are stories which have been done by Video Volunteers. Our producer Joel will pull up the story. Take a look at what is happening to tea estates in West Bengal. Now, these are the kind of stories which you need to look at, and we need to find a solution to what will happen to these people if these individuals end up being stuck by this lockdown over a prolonged period of time. Then how does that happen? Joel, why don't you pull up the Video Volunteers video, and I'll get Shamika to speak about it.
मेरा नाम विकास बर्मन है। मैं वेस्ट बंगाल राज्य की कुचबिहार डिस्ट्रिक्ट से हूँ। भी मैं काम कर रहा हूँ 2015 साल से। तो अभी मेरा यहाँ कोरोना के लेके जो अपडेट है वो है गांव में लॉकडाउन के बाद कुछ दिन लोग घर में रहा, लेकिन उसके बाद ऐसा लग रहा है कि बाजार में अभी रास्ते में जहाँ भी लोग दिखाई दे रहे हैं, जैसे उनके मन में कोई डर नहीं है। जैसे मेरे गांव का बात बताऊं, मेरे गांव में लोग एक साथ जुट रहे, घूम रहे, ऐसा चल रहे।
तो क्या वहाँ पे गवर्नमेंट का अनाउंसमेंट हुआ है, तो उसके बावजूद वहाँ पे आइसोलेशन नहीं कर रहे लोग?
नहीं, कुचबिहार में अभी 2-3 केस आया था, लेकिन वो अभी नेगेटिव है। अभी निजामुद्दीन का जो है उसमें से भी 6 लोग को यहाँ पे शनाख्त किया गया है, लेकिन अभी उन लोग होम क्वारंटाइन में ही है जी। और बाकी जो सुनीता देवी सिंह कालिम्पोंग का डेड हुआ था, उनकी फ्लाइट में 2 कुचबिहार की थे। वो दोनों भी एक आइसोलेशन में है एमजेएन में, उसका नेगेटिव आया है, और एक जो है वो आने के बाद होम क्वारंटाइन में ही है।
वहाँ पर जो लोग डेली बेस वर्कर्स भी होंगे बहुत सारे, उनका क्या सिचुएशन है?
उनका सिचुएशन तो जैसे उन लोग अभी घर में है, तो काम नहीं है, तो उन लोगों का खाने में बहुत दिक्कत है। मेरे को फोन आया, जो गांव में बहुत सारे ऐसे फैमिली है, वो खाने में दिक्कत हो रहा है, तो घर में बैठा था, और जब फोन आया जो ऐसा है, तो मैंने जो संगठन है स्वेच्छासेवी जो एनजीओ है वगैरह, वो फेसबुक पे देख रहा था जो लोग काम कर रहे हैं गाँव में, तो मैंने ऐसे 2-3 संस्थाओं से बात।
I think, see, now Shamika, see, on one hand, there is Gurugram, and Shalini Jindal is a resident of Gurugram, and well, citizens are all informed at everything. But then on the other hand, you have these parts of West Bengal. Is that the biggest challenge, Shalini, for the authorities? Shamika, for the authorities?
Well, look, Bhupen, there is the central government, the state government, there is local administration. In fact, the first round of announcements which you heard the central government make of that 1.7 lakh crores, it was almost entirely focused on the bottom 2 quintiles, right? The poorest. And it had to do with different kinds of cash transfers and the PDS and the construction workers. I mean, the entire effort was to make sure that if we are asking people to stay at home, then they shouldn't die of starvation, because that category really does live hand to mouth, right? And it's not just the migrant labor. Of course, migrant labor have sort of led to new set of logistic issues in terms of some of them are also stuck in between right now. But the point is, now is the time when I think the effective implementation of what has been announced now 2 weeks back is now that onus really does very much rest with the local administration to make it happen. Now, we've heard earlier Mohanji talk about the density. You know, Japan has one of the highest density, and they did not even go into a national lockdown. In fact, it's only 4 days back that declared a national emergency. Singapore, I mean, these are very OECD, very rich societies. But what I'm saying is, everyone is trying to do a lot of firefighting, and eventually, after considerable containment and success, even they are going into lockdown mode right now, because that is the nature of the beast. Right? So high density areas by themselves doesn't mean that are not, we talk about how many people get infected through one infected person. To contain that will require provisioning, just making masks available, making sure that when people go back to work, whether they are Narega workers or they are harvest, people going to harvest the Rabi crop, whether we are talking about a shop floor for the MSMEs, we can't just let people back in. Because even if you do, and no, what I'm saying is you have to let them back in, because work has to begin. It's too costly. And we forget that we are a poor, $2,000. We shouldn't compare our responses to 65,000 and 100,000 per capita, OECD countries. So we have to, therefore, this preemptive measure, which is very drastic and stringent, is also in many ways required, because we are a resource poor country. Preventive measures become almost absolutely necessary. But when we put people back on, then make sure that the provisioning of masks, that these basic screening and surveillance, which we started almost 2 months back, is now done factory by factory, field by field. You see, this is where the local administration now comes in. And that basic, protocols have to be set in place. Because even when we do a national sample and a screening, sort of a testing all across with a random sample, it will still be an estimate, Bhupen. It's not an actual count. 1.38 billion people are not going to get tested.
Right.
So it will still be an estimate at a district level, which means there will still be a possibility, as Mohanji said, a large number of them are asymptomatic. Right?
Then how do you deal with it? A lot of questions coming in. Mohanji, can I just put up some questions for you? Because a lot of viewers are watching this broadcast, both on Facebook and on Twitter. So look at what Sudha Sadanan is saying. Sudha is responding to what Shamika is talking about. And she's saying that work should begin, says Shamika, but we need to keep the workforce alive. Now, how are you going to keep the workforce alive? If you put these people back in, and as she's saying, if many of these people are asymptomatic, and I must point out, a lot of people whom I'm speaking to in the government are telling me that the biggest danger is that maybe these are just asymptomatic people. If these are asymptomatic people, you bring them back in the workforce, then you are really looking at a dangerous scenario. How do you then move forward, Mohan?
First of all, I don't think it's a dangerous scenario. Dangerous scenario is when you die from it. When the case mortality is just 1.66. This is not that kind of a disease. It's a mass spreader. You might have a large number of people down with it. As Jagannathan said, 25,000 people die a day in India of other causes, of old age and other illnesses. They die before their time. Most of them die before their time. But so I think, we've got to get a sense of proportion on this. More people are going to die out of joblessness and hunger than out of corona. So I think we've really got to see that how we can stagger the lockdowns. There are tight, bad clusters. There are identified clusters. Okay, you have lockdowns there. You can target elderly people for not to come out. You can say you don't come to work. If you're above 65 or above 60, families are obliged to keep them at home. Kids, don't let them go to school, primary school and middle school. But high schools can continue, college can continue, factories can continue. They can slowly start bringing them back in. This is as if tomorrow, if corona afflicts even 20% of the population, what is the mortality going to be? Is it going to spike substantially? No, you've got to consider all these facts together. You just can't get into this big thing and say that, we will die. We will die of other.
I just want to quickly bring in Jaggi on that point. Jaggi, jaan hai to jahan hai was the buzz. Now Prime Minister says jaan bhi hai, jahan bhi hai. Now all these points being made by Mohan Guruswamy, and a lot of people asking all these questions on Facebook as well as on Twitter. And everyone is simply asking one question. A, how do you get this sense of proportion that we're speaking about? That let us have a graded response. These cluster areas, don't open them. But areas which have not formed clusters will open them. High schools, can schools be opened? How do you move forward, Jaggi? I mean, administratively, just last night I had Yashovardhan Azad and I had Deepak Singhal, former Chief Secretary of UP. And Deepak Singhal was of this view that you empower district magistrates. You give money in the hands of district magistrates and you allow district magistrates to completely work in an independent manner. But knowing the Indian ecosystem the way you and I do, is it really a solution, Jaggi?
No, it's not. Our thing is the state capacity is weak at all levels. So in fact, what has happened the last 2.5 weeks and the remaining 3-4 days is that what you have essentially done is we have woken up the healthcare system where it is gearing up to deal with a larger number of potential patients, both just for testing and for this thing. So we have just moved to the stage. The last 3 weeks was not about flattening the curve, but by getting the whole bureaucracy, the healthcare bureaucracy, the police bureaucracy, and the entire system up so that they can now handle the next stage. So we need to do this. Now, in the next phase, next 2 phases, I think we need to start looking at the unlocking thing. Again, the state will need to start slowly allowing sector by sector, geography by geography to move out of the lockdown. And it's a long process. It's not going to happen. You can't suddenly say, okay, lockdown ends tomorrow. You got to do it one by one.
Correct.
So that the state is able to say that companies that can handle the health risks of their staff should be able to start first. Companies, as a limited amount of public transport, air transport can be allowed, but your airfares will go to double the levels because you can't seat people 3 in a row now. You will have to, even your buses cannot go packed with 150 guys hanging out of there. So you'll have to start it slowly. So when you start bus transport, train transport, everything will have to be heavily policed till you reach a stage where you know that the spread will be far lower. That's where I think you need to do it. You need to do it little by little, week by week. You need to keep changing it. It'll take probably the process will take at least 3 months before you are even at 70% of normal.
Okay, there's another, Ira, since Ira is there as well. Ira, there's a question, and this is coming from Siddharth Pandey, one of our viewers on Facebook. And look at what he's saying. One very serious issue which has been overlooked, Ira, is the fact that doctors and nurses are not being tested in many government hospitals. Now, we've spoken about agriculture sector. We're looking at, hospitality sector, tourism sector, everything. The medical sector itself, Ira, since you're a yoga expert and you must be speaking to a whole range of people, are you getting this sense of being worried as far as medical professionals are concerned? That are their interests really being protected, Ira?
Yeah. Look at the case that happened in AIMS. There was a young couple, the doctor, both of them got coronavirus and admitted in ward. So I think the medical practitioners are most at risk, but they have to do their jobs. It's not their option. I really think that medical practitioners need to be offered some sort of antibodies. I know the US is already looking into it. I was watching an interview with the head of NIH, and there are ways that Italy and the US have looked after their medical practitioners, and India has to really put a focus on this. Another way to do things is, in the time of war, okay, in the time of war, the government requisitions vehicles. So there's not enough cars, they go to the public and requisition their vehicles. So I do feel like in the time of coronavirus, even medical practitioners, like private doctors, can be asked to come and be of service. And I really think that this is a very good strategy because these are licensed doctors that the government of India has licensed. So why can't we also get them on board? Why does this have to fall on only the government hospitals that are anyways overloaded? So I really think that this is warfare. I mean, this is a type of warfare. We are in a state of emergency right now. The entire country has been locked down, and this is medical warfare. So we have to really also, we have to look after our doctors, but we also, the biggest doctors at risk are those working at government hospitals right now. But I do think India has so many doctors, especially private doctors. Why aren't we bringing them into the fringe? And why aren't we asking them to come and also join this army that we're building, where doctors, nurses, and medical practitioners this is our army right now. So I really think that something the government needs to look at is how do we how do we requisition medical practitioners to come and join this cause right now? So the onus is not on only government doctors who are anyways overburdened.
You know what I want to do, Joel? I just want you to pull up Shamika's Twitter timeline because there's some very relevant data which Shamika has been tweeting about since yesterday in terms of where we are when it comes to our international comparisons as far as death rates is concerned, as far as the number of per 100 cases which are being tested, how many people are actually testing positive. I think this entire conversation, just look at this, and these are very, very important points, I think. You know, active deaths in terms of where we are. Where was China? China seems to have flattened well far quickly. But in India, I mean, you know, Shamika's argument is that the COVID death rates per million, South Korea, Japan, Italy slowing, but Belgium, Sweden, Canada, and India rising. Now, if this is where we are, Shamika, if this is where we are, where the death rate is increasing in India, and we are having this debate that should you go in for an extended lockdown, should you finish the lockdown now? Is this the real challenge? That if you end the lockdown, you go in for graded lockdown, as Mohan and Jaggi are trying to argue, then this death rate, which is coming up very clearly through these graphics, this death rate may suddenly show a huge increase. Is that the real risk here?
Well, Bhupen, when you compare India's death rate per million, we are still much, much better off. So I think the perspective that Mohanji and Jaggi are talking about absolutely required when you have a large view of the economy as a whole. And I mean as a nation. I'm not just talking about opportunity cost economically, but also in terms of lives. Our mortality rate is actually very low compared to what you're seeing in the other hotspot countries. Right. So the graded lockdown removal, therefore, I think obviously not sector wise because the supply chain is all interconnected, but geographically is what we have to begin to open. But this is what I'm saying that, you know, the best way to make a decision is to just ramp up testing in areas which are untouched. So now you have a credible reason to say that, look, these 300, 400 districts indeed have very low infection rates. So let's you know, with all the preventive measures, let's go back to as much economic activity as we can afford at the moment. But I also want to actually say something to Ira's observation. Ira, right now, it's not as much a private versus public, because what we are seeing is several private hospitals have also become COVID hospitals, right? They have been designated. So I think that public-private, the tension isn't so much in terms of the sectors, it's more in terms of having adequate protective equipments, having adequate, you know, just the infrastructure in terms of ventilators and ICUs available. And I'm saying now this is much more from a preparedness perspective, because we are nowhere there right now. Right? If you compare the first cases that happened in almost all hotspot countries, including India, was in the last week of January. And in that time frame, just look at the rush in the hospital, look at the mortality that you're seeing in all of Europe, in UK. In fact, UK numbers are showing almost no recoveries at all. Now, either they're not measuring recovery, which would be a bit strange, but their data is showing incredibly high, you know, growing mortality. But even the US, many thousands of hundreds of thousands of people are now lined up at hospitals. We don't have that hospital rush, whether public or private. We are not seeing the rush of patients with this. Now, given that we don't have patient level data, what we have tried to do is look at how many patients are coming in with acute respiratory disorder, because that is what comes closest to COVID-like symptoms. And we are seeing that, you know, this year, looks very similar to last year and the year before that. So there is no spike if you look at in terms of a hospital run. And yet we have to prepare, because we're still at a very early stage in terms of the growth of the numbers, and we are growing. Hopefully the lockdown has sort of circumvented and has stopped that growth. But in terms of preparedness, we still have to go out and create that infrastructure and the PPEs and really get the best of whatever we can afford for the doctors currently. So absolutely, very good points in terms of keeping our you know, healthcare providers at the forefront and the center of our effort in terms of fighting this crisis.
But you know, Shamika, here's the other point, and I think this again, this falls in line with the basic question that we're trying to answer in the context of all these data points. Confirmed cases in countries with 5,000, 50,000 plus cases, total deaths in countries with 3,000 plus deaths in India as of April 10. I mean, if you look at this graph, and Joel, let's stay with this graph for a moment. If you look at this picture, it tells you where is India. You know, India is at 246 deaths as of 10th of April. I'm sure the numbers may well have increased today. But from the point of view of what you argue, Shamika, that we don't have a good healthcare infrastructure, but our response so far, despite this lack of infrastructure that we have, does it tell us that where are we as far as flattening of this curve is concerned? Are we near flattening of this curve, Shamika, in any way?
You know, everything, Bhupen, is an outcome and function of how much we are testing, how much we know what the current situation is. Now, given, and there we must realize that there has been an incredible ramping up after 27th of March, right? Until 27th of March, we were increasing, but at a very slow pace. And at that point, our infection rate, meaning how many people are testing positive for every 100 tests, was around 2.5%. After the 27th, this number has increased in thousands. Now we have crossed about 1.6 lakh. And yet the infection rate or percentage is about 4.3, which is telling you that we are testing more, and we are also testing in places where there is likelihood of infection, and yet the infection rate is still quite controlled. So I frankly, you know, I'm very glad that many causes, we are hearing of course, humidity and temperature, innate immunity of, Indians. It could be the BCG. There are many competing and complementary sort of causes out there in the literature, many of them not peer reviewed, and that's why we don't know what is more credible. But the lockdown has played a role. And the reason I say this is because if you look at the initial growth path, in fact, we were growing at a rate where we were doubling every 3 days. Okay. Now, at that rate, we should have been around 34,000 cases today. Right? And today we are around 7,000 cases, a little more. Now, that's telling you that in this dynamic situation, the country, I mean, there is a lockdown, but there are also many other things that are happening. People are taking precaution, right? And because of all of this, you are seeing that there is a considerable flattening. Now we are doubling at every 6 days. So we have almost, half the speed of infection. And that's a good thing. That's a great thing.
So therefore, as we get some clarity, as I hear from all of you, that if the rate of infection is not spreading as dramatically, then maybe there is a case that in those areas where the infection has been controlled or is not showing that kind of increase, maybe there is a case with precautions in place to go in for economic activity. Let's start with the economic activities. But Jaggi, let me reverse this argument for a moment. Because, a lot of viewers, both on Facebook as well as on Periscope, are asking this question. Asad is asking this question. Vicky Chaudhary is raising this question. Rishi Kannan, well-known RJ from Mumbai who's watching this broadcast, is also raising this question, which is this, that since there are states, like state of Maharashtra has decided to go in, for lockdown till the 30th of April. Do you get this sense, Jackie, that if we were to be in a lockdown in this country, say 70% of India stays in lockdown till the 30th of April for another 2 weeks, will that be in any ways a bad economic scenario? Will that end up creating a situation where the damage to India's economy will end up being irreversible?
See, if you're just saying that another 2 weeks, whether it's going to be catastrophic, I probably say no. But provided in that 2 weeks, you start ramping up the areas. If those 400 districts can quickly do, say, something like 1,000 to 5,000 samples and check it out, and you release those 400 districts in the next, say, 10 days, then by April 30, half the country will be up and going. So that's important. So my only point is you don't go around, but I would think after April 30th, if you keep the lockdown going endlessly for more than just a few very high hotspots, I think you're going to cause economic disaster for 2 reasons. One is I think most likely going to have at least 1 quarter of negative growth next quarter if you're going to do that, and that's disastrous. Secondly, the long-term unemployment, structural unemployment will increase because people who have left their job for months will not come back, will not come looking for jobs. Your unemployment rate will actually show an artificially low level because people have stopped looking for jobs. And mostly you will have a social situation where there will be a lot of crisis. So I think it is not good for us to contemplate any kind of general lockdown after April 30th. I would have hoped that the things will start changing even now, but I think 2 weeks probably we can just about live with it. But beyond that, I think the economic disaster stares us in the face.
Mohan, do you subscribe to that theory, Mohan? That if you go in, I'm saying that in Uttarakhand, for instance, let me name the states for you. Delhi Chief Minister wants to go in for lockdown till the 30th. Uttarakhand Chief Minister wants to stay in lockdown till the 30th. Maharashtra Chief Minister wants to stay in lockdown. Rajasthan, Punjab, I mean, the list is Shivraj Singh Chauhan, who's just become Chief Minister, does not want to stay on with this lockdown till the 30th. I want to know that if these states which are going in for lockdown, and tomorrow you have a scenario where 70% of India remains in lockdown, will that deliver a body blow to India's economy?
Absolutely. I'm not as sanguine as Jagannathan is about contraction of the economy. I think if you lose one month GDP, as we are going to lose now, effectively, and you add another half a month to it, you're talking about 12% contraction. That's a huge amount. And to recover from that, and then above all, I think our biggest problem is that we have no social security net. We've rendered 100 million people jobless, wageless. You see the latest CMIE study, 31% unemployment out of an unorganized sector of 400 million people.
So we can't afford that. We just can't afford to be this perennial state of lockdown.
People are going to have no money to buy food. They already have no money to buy food. People who live on daily wages just earn enough to live for that day. They're feeding families of 4, 5, 6 people. One person working. The thing is you've got to get money into the hands of people and get them working. And if you don't think of that, and you're only talking about this social distancing, 1 yard space, 2 yard space, putting squares on the ground, it's not going to, doesn't apply at all to most of India. Everybody's crowded.
Shamika, can you list two immediate steps, Shamika? Can you list two immediate steps which you think need to be taken? Because again, one criticism of the establishment has been that there is far too much emphasis on the emotional aspect of dealing with this lockdown. The Prime Minister comes either with a mask. The Prime Minister asks people to show torchlights, flashlights. And I've tweeted about it that all this is meant to keep people in high spirits. We're a country of 1.21 billion people. We all deal with crisis in different ways. So maybe the Prime Minister is reaching out to that, and that's a political response. But is enough attention being shown towards how to manage the economic aspect of this lockdown?
Well, first of all, whether we are clapping in the balconies or the flashlights, etc. It is not just about spirits, Bhupen. When you've locked 1.38 billion people in their houses, it's very much also a mental health sort of an intervention. You do need to really keep in touch and keep reassuring that, look, this is important. And frankly, most people, I mean, if you just look at barring a few cases and hordes that we are seeing, a lot of people have indeed locked themselves. I mean, that is how we are saying the complete economy has come to a grinding halt. So those are required measures. But let me also tell you, the first set of announcements that happened, I think it's about time we also did some fact check on what is the nature of the implementation of that, whether it was construction workers, the SHGs getting money, PM Kisan, the slew of announcements, that 1.7 lakh crore total that she announced, the FM, right in the third day. I think that was entirely addressing, but now we need to see how much of that has indeed reached. Where are the gaps in implementation, right? Because that's where it's hurting right now. If it is, and we need to plug that.
Let me just correct that figure of 1.7 lakh crores. Out of that, 52,000 crores belongs to the construction workers fund, which is already there and which was supposed to have been spent. That money is already in the system. There's no additional money coming. You really got to.
That's the problem. Shamika,
I know more.
Shamika, exactly that.
Not even 6.6% of the GDP.
Shamika,
this is nothing.
Yeah, Shamika's point is exactly that we need scrutiny. And that's what I'm attempting to do via this broadcast. Because all this is not done anywhere else. I want to know where is that money going. Now, Shamika, is there any mechanism? How do we find out that the money which has been allocated is actually being spent on the ground?
Well, I think that is where you guys come in, Bhupen. I mean, this is where now you need a reportage from ground. You need local. I mean, there has to be a process, and I don't want to speak on behalf of government. I have no idea. I'm just looking at reports that are coming in from different parts of the country to see what exactly is the nature of the implementation of those early schemes, right? Now, but then there is this entire, the remaining 3 quintiles and the economic activities, the MSMEs, and then of course the McKinsey report, which you highlighted in the beginning, which looks at much more organized sectors. If you're looking at aviation, hospitality, etc. The longer we keep them locked down, the costs are indeed very high. Now, for instance, the monetary responses we have had, where there has been a moratorium. Now, the moratorium to be extended by 3 months that the banks are meant to. We know that NBFCs are a large part of that, right? A lot of MSMEs take working capital from NBFCs, and yet, the moratorium sort of getting extended or freezing that for next 3 months has not gotten extended to NBFCs yet. So now I think the next round of announcement which you're going to see will be almost entirely looking at economic activities, trying to minimize the distortion. That's all one can do. And by the way, even if right now we say 400 districts, let's say Bihar, because of, again, lack of testing, or maybe the infection rate is very low, let's say Bihar goes back to normal. But a lot of Biharis are employed in Maharashtra. So now while Maharashtra remains in a lockdown, to open up Bihar is also like a partial sort of economic activity, right? So I think you might have to run specialized trains then, which bring back people from one area to the other. Again, many things which are being discussed, but we have to wait for the announcement. And frankly, we need a lot of local implementation level details right now, including the pain points. It's not just a top-down approach. I'm saying that how much have we spent? And this is where you need to now reach out to local media, local administration, and try and figure out, for instance, what has happened to Narega. Maybe this is a time we should talk about an urban Narega, right? I mean, because a lot of people will be stuck. Urban poverty is also very much a reality of India. We keep thinking rural. A lot of our efforts in policy is towards rural area, and rightfully, but India is 65% urban today in reality.
How do you deal with that?
So those are the kind of conversations which I think the government is perhaps having with a lot of stakeholders. So the second round of announcement, which I'm hoping the FM will make soon, will be addressing the insecurities and the disruption to the economy.
Final question then to you, Mohan. You travel a lot, and you get a lot of your views from the ground, particularly from the Hindi heartland, Bihar and UP. I must point out, last weekend in this lockdown, I ended up traveling almost 2,000 kilometers because I had to go to Banaras for some work, and I ended up speaking to some locals, on the way. And Mohan, the story that was being projected was of total doomsday scenario. I mean, already the feeling is that we are in for a kind of an environment that nobody knows how to get out of it. So, from a rural perspective, how do you deal with this lockdown, 15-day lockdown, and very strong possibility, from what I hear, of 70% of India remaining under lockdown even post the 15th?
Well, it's going to be absolutely disastrous. You saw what happened in Surat today, a spontaneous outburst, and they set fire to the market, and they went on a riot. Now, people are going to be hungry, people are going to be jobless. You expect spontaneous combustions like that from all over the country now. I just spoke to people in 5 Telangana districts today. I'm in Hyderabad. I've been locked down here for the last 6 weeks. And people from the districts are saying that the situation is awful. There is, this so-called administration doesn't exist, go beyond the district headquarters and maybe to the taluk headquarters. Where is the government in the village? Who is the government? The only representative of a government, if you have one there, is a school teacher. PDS covers only 13% of the population. So where is PDS you're talking about? Modi is talking about giving so much of grain and so much of dal. And What he's announced, the only thing he's announced is the domestic gas thing, and then 500 rupees per woman through the Jandan account. 500 rupees. 500 rupees is 2.5 days of wages for Narega.
Yeah. How do you deal with it? How do you deal with it?
Government. So you have to get your systems working fast, use the Jandan accounts, put money into those accounts. 5,000 rupees a head per month, you should do it for 3 months. Do it now. You say you have those accounts. You say you've covered 72% of the population. Then do it.
But Jaggi, where is the money? Jaggi, where is the money? No, Jaggi, my point is, Jaggi, Mohan has a valid argument. 500 rupees per person means, we can calculate it. It's what, 2 rupees or something per day. But Jaggi, if we are really hoping that the the government or the Prime Minister will find some money from some secret hidden fund and it will be deposited in all these Jandan accounts, where is the money going to come from?
Well, two things. One is, of course, that you're going to have to borrow directly from the Reserve Bank, which is you have to monetize your deficit. In the short run, when the economy is down and out, you're not going to get great amount of tax revenues or any kind of revenues, including GST. Right. So what you really need to do is print the money, give it out, and then prime the pump so that economic activity begins, and then you can start retiring those things. So in the short term, there is no option but to monetize the deficits. And at a point when inflation has crashed, okay, 2 months ago, we were talking about 7% consumer price index. This last month, I believe it might have come down to some 2 or 3%. Right? So you might even have negative inflation if you look at it.
Bhupen,
you have to monetize the deficit in the short run, borrow a lot, it is possible, but hope that by this end of the second quarter, economy will start stabilizing. Then, of course, you can think of going back to a little amount of fiscal discipline.
I think the Reserve Bank has 9 lakh crores as reserves. You can touch some of that. You've got $480 billion sitting in American banks, getting 0.5% or less. You can bring some of that back and monetize it. Government employees will go on leave now. LTC will start. Annual leave will start. You cancel leave this year, cancel LTC. You'll get 1% of your wage bill. 1% of GDP will save there. You start accumulating money. You set up a target of 10 lakh, 12 lakh crores, and then go and get that money. Even if the top 10 corporates, I looked at the balance sheets, are claiming 10 lakh crores as cash reserves. Reliance alone has got 4 lakh crores.
I just have one disagreement with this. If you start cutting out everybody's salaries, you're going to get even lower demand than now.
What's this?
It's a chicken and egg situation.
But first priority is put money in the hands of people.
Yeah.
Get the consumption going.
That has to be done.
The priority has to be that to put money in the hands of people and in the pockets of individuals. Now, Jaggi is right that if you start looking for corporates to put in more money, then the salaries will come down. Then where is
they show? I'm talking about cash reserves. I'm not asking them to give money from this year. They're cash reserves. Money sitting in banks. They declare it in the balance sheets.
Well, Bhupen, I don't think the issue of where is the money.
Only 10% of that.
Ways. I mean, you have the ways and means account.
Let's be Shamika.
COVID bond. I mean, the ways and means account. You have the reserves. Mohanji also
not a single idea which has come out of government.
These are times when all hands on deck. And oil prices are falling. I mean, you have to really use all means right now. And it's okay. People will absolutely understand. Every economy is currently, for the deficit to slide. There is no issue. There's absolutely no issue concerning that. The point is, how do you spend that? And what is the right way to spend? And I do agree that first thing has to be give money in the hands of the poor, right? Make sure that, and I mean, by poverty, I'm not just talking just the bottom 40%. A lot of people in the third quintile, they're all sitting at home. They also wait for their monthly salaries. We have to make sure that a certain minimum, cash in hand is there for that basic, basic sort of human needs are being met. That doesn't come to a standstill because that's when it truly transforms into a humanitarian crisis.
All right. Shamika, Ravi, R. Jagannathan, and Mohan Guruswamy, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us on this special broadcast. I want all of you to know that this is a daily broadcast that I'm doing now. And I completely agree with what Shamika is saying, that there is an urgent requirement of greater scrutiny. There is an urgent requirement, I think, of greater scrutiny of expenditure which is being committed by the government. And unfortunately, that scrutiny does not happen. Any one of you have any suggestions, thoughts? You all have access to data points. Feel free. What no one else does, Bhupendra Chaubey on this platform certainly is very, very keen to do so. Lots and lots of comments which are coming in this week. I'll paste the link on social media platforms, and feel free to share it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us on this special broadcast. Thank you so much.
Bye.
All the best. All the best. Bye. Bye. Bye.